The Hells Angels biker watched the little girl pull a metal box from a gas pump cavity, and the secret inside shook his core. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. On a freezing cold evening in a small town just outside of Los Angeles, a man in a worn leather jacket revved his motorcycle engine, making the familiar rumble that echoed off the gas station walls. He had been on the road for hours, but something about this particular stop felt different. As the biker dismounted his motorcycle and walked toward the corner of the station, he noticed something strange. A small figure emerged from the shadows. It was a young girl, no older than 10, with messy hair and a thick winter coat. She was holding something, a small metal box, which she seemed to pull from the crevice of a gas pump cavity. The biker froze, his instincts kicking in. The girl looked up at him, eyes wide, and he could sense the mix of fear and determination in her gaze. The biker's reputation preceded him, his tattoos, his leather vest adorned with the Hells Angels insignia, the hard edge of his voice. But what he saw in her eyes stopped him cold. He had been down many roads, fought many battles, but something about this girl felt different. As she approached him, holding the metal box tightly in her hands, she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You don't know what's inside," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The biker raised an eyebrow, his mind racing. He had seen a lot in his years as a Hells Angels member, but nothing quite like this. The girl looked so small, so innocent, yet there was something in her expression that told him she knew far more than she should. He knelt down, his heavy boots crunching against the gravel. "What is it?" he asked, his voice gruff but oddly gentle. The girl swallowed hard before answering. "I don't know, but it's important. My daddy used to say that this box holds something that could change everything." The biker's interest peaked. He had heard stories of hidden treasures, secrets that could make or break lives, but this felt different. The way she held onto that box so tightly, the way she looked at him with a mix of trust and fear, it was clear that whatever was inside, it was more than just a piece of junk. "Why are you showing this to me?" the biker asked, his voice softer now. The girl glanced around nervously, making sure no one was watching, then leaned in closer. "Because it's not just for anyone. You're the only one who can keep it safe." The biker felt a chill run down his spine. It was one of those moments in life when you realize you're standing at the edge of something much bigger than yourself, and the only way forward is to jump. The girl handed him the box, her small hands trembling slightly. As the biker took it, he noticed how cold it was, as though it had been sitting out in the elements for a long time. He turned the box over in his hands, looking for any markings or clues. But there was nothing. Just a simple, rusted metal box. "What is this?" the biker asked, but the girl was already walking away, disappearing into the shadows of the station. He called after her, but she didn't turn back. "It's yours now," she called over her shoulder. "You have to figure it out." With that, she was gone, leaving the biker standing alone in the cold, holding the mysterious metal box. The weight of it in his hands felt heavier than it looked. He glanced around, but there was no sign of anyone else. Just the empty gas station, the quiet hum of the night, and the box in his hands. Whatever was inside, whatever secret it held, was about to change his life forever. And as the biker mounted his motorcycle and revved the engine once more, he couldn't help but wonder what he had just gotten himself into. The biker stood still for a moment, staring at the metal box in his hands. The streetlights from the empty gas station flickered as if they were struggling to stay on in the thickening night. He was alone, but the weight of the box in his hands felt like it was pulling him into a world he wasn't ready to face. It had only been minutes since the little girl disappeared into the shadows, and yet, it felt like a lifetime had passed. He glanced around the parking lot, checking for any signs of danger, but everything remained eerily quiet. The only sound was the hum of the neon sign above the gas pumps and the soft whirring of the wind. He could feel the cold air biting through his leather jacket, but it wasn't the cold that made his skin prickle with unease. It was the box. The girl had been insistent. She'd told him to keep it safe. He didn't know why, but he felt like his life was about to change forever because of it. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He needed to figure out what was inside. As he climbed back onto his motorcycle, the box sat heavy on his lap. He revved the engine and sped down the highway, the night air cutting through him as he headed toward the only place he knew he could think clearly, the old garage. It was a secluded spot, just outside of town, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might be following him. The road stretched out ahead, empty and dark. The motorcycle's headlights pierced the gloom, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out to him. The biker's mind raced as he thought about what the girl had said. "You're the only one who can keep it safe." Who was she, really? Why had she trusted him with something so important? The words echoed in his mind, over and over. He gripped the handlebars tighter, as if the harder he held on, the more control he would have over the situation. As he pulled into the garage, the familiar smell of oil and grease hit him like a wave. It was a small place, tucked away behind an old mechanic shop, a place he'd used for years to work on his bike and escape from the world. The biker parked his motorcycle and walked into the dimly lit space. The air inside was cool, filled with the scent of metal and old tools. He dropped the box onto the workbench and stared at it for a moment. Whatever was inside, it was clear that it wasn't just a simple treasure. He could feel it in his bones. The weight of the mystery was far heavier than the box itself. He reached for a nearby tool, a crowbar, and pried open the rusty latch. The metal groaned in protest as the box creaked open. Inside, there was a stack of faded photographs and a small, weathered map. The photographs were old, some yellowing at the edges, others torn, but they all had one thing in common: the biker's face. It took him a moment to process what he was seeing. There he was, standing in front of a group of men in leather jackets. His younger self, wearing the same Hell's Angels patch, surrounded by a few familiar faces. The photos were taken years ago, back when he was just starting out with the club. But the real shock came when he saw the next photograph. It was a picture of a child, a little girl, with dark hair and the same striking eyes as the one who had handed him the box. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. His heart skipped a beat. How could this be? The girl, the same one from the gas station, was in the picture, standing next to him and his old gang. But that wasn't possible. He had no memory of this. Had she been with the club before? His mind was spinning with questions, but the map in the box caught his attention. He unfolded it carefully. It was an old, hand-drawn map, with locations marked in faded red ink. There were several circles around specific areas, places he recognized. They were scattered across the state, but one location stood out. The name of a small town, marked with an X in the center, made his pulse race. The biker's fingers trembled as he traced the line with his thumb. This was no ordinary map. It was a treasure map, or at least that's what it looked like. But what treasure could possibly be hidden in a place he'd long forgotten? And what did the little girl have to do with all of this? The biker shook his head again, trying to steady himself. He had to figure this out. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. There was something much bigger at play here, something far beyond his control, and the more he thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. He wasn't just holding onto a box. He was holding onto a secret that had been buried for years. The night was far from over, and the road ahead was more dangerous than ever. He couldn't turn back now. The box had found its way into his hands for a reason, and he had no choice but to follow the map, wherever it led him. The biker stared at the map, his fingers tracing the lines with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just a map, it was a road to something much bigger. The X marked a location, and his gut told him that he was getting closer to something that had been buried for far too long. Something dangerous. Something personal. He didn't know why the little girl had given him the box, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized she wasn't just some random child. She had a connection to him, and whatever was hidden in that town, in the place marked by the X, had to be part of his past. The biker stuffed the map into his jacket and grabbed the keys to his motorcycle. There was no time to waste. He revved the engine, the familiar roar of his bike almost comforting in the silence of the night. The road stretched out ahead of him, dark and empty, just the way he liked it. He knew the risks. He knew the dangers. But something about this felt different. As he sped down the highway, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. His instincts told him that someone was watching, following him. He kept his eyes on the road but kept his senses sharp, scanning the shadows for any movement. He was no stranger to being hunted, but tonight felt different. The town marked on the map wasn't far. It was a small, quiet place, tucked away in the foothills of the mountains, a place he hadn't been to in years. The last time he was there, he had been a different man, before the Hells Angels, before the violence, before the betrayal. That place held memories he wasn't ready to confront. But he had no choice. The biker rode on, the wind whipping past him, the night air cold against his skin. As he neared the town, the silence seemed to grow thicker, heavier. He turned onto the narrow road that led into the heart of the town, the headlights of his motorcycle illuminating the faded signs and old buildings that lined the streets. The place felt like it had been frozen in time, forgotten by the rest of the world. He parked his bike near the old diner, its neon sign flickering weakly in the night. The streets were empty, save for a few cars parked along the curb. The town was dead quiet. He wasn't sure what he expected, but this wasn't it. He scanned the area, looking for any signs of life, but there was nothing. The only sound was the soft hum of the diner's neon lights. He walked toward the building, his boots clicking against the pavement. As he reached for the door, he froze. There, in the corner of his eye, he saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was her, the little girl. She was standing there, watching him from the darkness, her eyes wide and unblinking. She hadn't followed him here, had she? He took a cautious step forward, but she didn't move. Her face was pale, almost ghostly in the dim light. He stopped, unsure of what to do. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, staring at him with those same eyes. He felt a shiver run down his spine. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. The girl didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a key. She held it up, and he could see the old, rusted metal glinting in the light. It was a key, but to what? She stepped forward, slowly, cautiously, until she was right in front of him. "You have to find it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The biker's heart raced. Find what? He didn't have time for games, for cryptic messages. But something about the way she said it, the way her voice trembled, made him believe her. "Where?" he asked, his voice firm, desperate for answers. The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked past him, toward the old diner, then back at him. "It's inside," she said, before turning and walking back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as she had come. The biker stood there for a moment, his mind reeling. What was going on? He looked down at the key in his hand, feeling its cold weight. He didn't know what had opened, but he was sure of one thing. Whatever it was, it had to be inside the diner. With no other options, he walked into the building. The door creaked as he pushed it open, the smell of stale coffee and old grease hitting him immediately. The diner was deserted, except for a few scattered napkins and dirty plates left on the tables. The place had the feeling of a place long abandoned, yet somehow still standing. He scanned the room, looking for anything unusual. And then, near the back, he saw it. A door, barely noticeable, hidden behind a curtain. It was a small, unmarked door that led to the back of the diner. He approached it slowly, the key in his hand trembling. This was it. The secret. Whatever had been hidden here, whatever had been locked away, was just behind this door. As he slid the key into the lock, the mechanism clicked, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that led down into darkness. The biker hesitated for only a moment before stepping through the narrow door. The air in the room was stale, the scent of old wood and mildew hanging heavy. His boots clicked softly against the worn wooden floor as he moved down the stairs, the key still clutched tightly in his hand. The further he descended, the darker it became, and soon, the faint light from the diner above seemed a distant memory. It was a dank, cold basement, lit only by a flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were covered with old, peeling wallpaper, and the floor was littered with forgotten crates and dust-covered furniture. At the far end of the basement, he spotted something that made his heart skip a beat, an old wooden chest, locked up tight, as though it had been waiting for him. He walked toward it slowly, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. The biker knew that whatever was inside this chest would change everything. He could feel it in his gut. His hand gripped the key as he approached the chest. He knelt down and carefully inserted the key into the lock. It clicked with a satisfying sound, and for the first time, the chest was opened in years. He lifted the heavy lid, the hinges creaking in protest, revealing the contents inside. The biker's breath caught in his throat. The chest was filled with papers, old photographs, and what looked like a small, rusted metal box. The photos were familiar, yet foreign at the same time, black and white images of men in leather jackets, some of whom he recognized from his days in the Hells Angels, others whose faces were foreign to him. But the most unsettling part was the woman in the photos. Her eyes were unmistakable. It was her, the little girl. But now, she was no longer a child. She was an adult, standing next to the men, her face frozen in time, as if she had been part of this world all along. He sifted through the photos, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the mystery of the girl, the connection to the Hells Angels, and what this meant for his own life. What was the connection between the club and this woman? And why was she hidden away in these old, forgotten pictures? The biker's fingers trembled as he pulled out an envelope from the bottom of the chest. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the contents quickly. It was a letter, written in a shaky hand, dated more than 20 years ago. It read, "If you are reading this, it means the secret is finally out. She is the key to everything. Protect her, or all will be lost." The biker felt a chill run down his spine as he read the words. He folded the letter carefully and shoved it into his jacket pocket. This was bigger than anything he could have imagined. The girl, the woman, was connected to something far deeper than just the Hells Angels. She was a part of something much larger. The biker stood up quickly, the adrenaline kicking in as he realized that whatever he had uncovered in this basement was just the tip of the iceberg. He needed to find her. He needed answers. He turned to leave, but then something caught his eye. The small, rusted metal box. It was the same kind of box the girl had handed him outside the gas station. He picked it up cautiously, his fingers brushing against the cold, worn surface. He could feel the weight of it, the mystery that lay within. He had no idea what was inside, but he knew that it was crucial to everything that was happening. With a sense of urgency, he pocketed the box and headed for the stairs. As he climbed back up into the diner, the world outside seemed to have changed. The night air was heavier, more oppressive. He didn't know who was watching him now, or who had been behind the girl's cryptic warning, but he was certain of one thing. There was no turning back. The secrets buried in that basement were only the beginning. And the truth about the woman, the Hells Angels, and what they were all connected to was waiting for him. The road ahead was going to be dangerous, but the biker had no choice but to follow it. He was already too deep into this mystery to walk away. He had to protect her. He had to find out why this was happening, why the world had been turned upside down by a simple metal box and a girl with the eyes that haunted him. He reached for his keys, started his motorcycle, and revved the engine. The road was calling him, and this time, it was leading him into the unknown. The biker sped down the empty road, the sound of his motorcycle's engine cutting through the stillness of the night. His mind was racing, the weight of the box in his pocket pressing against his side as if it were urging him to move faster, to uncover the secrets it held. The cold wind whipped past him, but he barely felt it. His thoughts were consumed by the events of the night, the photographs, the letter, and most of all, the mysterious woman who had somehow woven herself into the fabric of his life. He couldn't shake the image of her, the young girl, now grown, her eyes haunting him like a ghost from the past. He had to find her. He had to know what she knew, what she was hiding. The map, the key, the chest in the basement. All of it was leading him toward one thing. But what was it? And why did it feel like his past was colliding with his present in ways he couldn't understand? The town on the map was only a few miles away now. It was small, a place he hadn't visited in years. He had memories here, some good, some bad, but none of them felt relevant anymore. All that mattered now was the path in front of him, the one that was pulling him deeper into the mystery. As he turned onto the road leading into the heart of the town, his headlights illuminated a street that looked unchanged. The old diner, the weathered houses, and the faint glow of the streetlights all seemed frozen in time. It was like nothing had moved forward since he'd last been here. The biker pulled up in front of the diner and parked his motorcycle. The town was quiet, almost too quiet. There was no one on the streets, no sign of life except for the occasional flicker of a light in a window. The diner's sign buzzed faintly, but even that seemed like a ghost of a time long past. He stepped off his bike and walked toward the entrance of the diner, his boots making a sharp sound against the pavement. He had a feeling that he wasn't going to find the answers he was looking for here, but he had to start somewhere. As he opened the door, the bell above it chimed, and the dim interior of the diner greeted him. It was empty, save for the old waitress behind the counter. She looked up when he entered, her tired eyes scanning him briefly before she went back to polishing the glasses in front of her. "You're not from around here," she said, her voice raspy but kind. "I used to be," he replied, his voice low. "Just passing through." She nodded, not looking up. "Well, you're in for a quiet night. This town's seen better days. Nothing much happens here anymore." He didn't respond. Instead, he walked over to a booth in the corner and sat down, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. He felt it again. The sensation that something was wrong, that he was being drawn into something much bigger than he could comprehend. He pulled out the metal box from his pocket and set it on the table. He needed to open it. He needed to know what was inside. The waitress, noticing the box, stopped in her tracks and turned to look at him. "What's that?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. The biker hesitated for a moment before answering. "Something I'm supposed to find." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press him further. Instead, she turned away, leaving him with his thoughts. He reached for the box, his fingers brushing against the cold metal. For a moment, he just stared at it, wondering what kind of secret it could hold. Was it connected to the photos, to the woman? Was it part of a puzzle that he had to solve? He twisted the box in his hands, looking for a way to open it. There was no latch, no keyhole, just a plain, rusted surface. But then, as his fingers grazed over the side, he felt something, an engraving, faint but distinct. It was a number, a series of digits. He squinted, trying to make them out. 4-7-1-9. The number made no sense to him, but it felt important. It felt like the next clue in a game he didn't understand. He turned the box over and over in his hands, trying to figure out what to do next, when suddenly, the door to the diner swung open, and a cold gust of wind swept inside. The biker looked up, his heart racing as he saw two men walk in. They were dressed in dark clothes, their faces obscured by hats and shadows. The biker instinctively reached for his jacket, his fingers brushing the handle of the gun tucked inside. He had no idea who they were, but they didn't look like people he wanted to get involved with. The men didn't notice him right away. They walked past the booths, their eyes scanning the room. But when one of them saw the biker, their gaze locked. The man's expression shifted, just for a moment, and the biker's blood ran cold. He knew that look. It was a look of recognition. The man had seen him before, and the biker had a feeling that the quiet night he had hoped for was over. The game was about to get much more dangerous, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming next. The biker's grip on the metal box tightened as he watched the two men approach. His instincts screamed at him to move, to escape, but something in the air told him that running wasn't an option this time. The men were clearly looking for him, and there was no way he was going to let them take him down without a fight. His hand instinctively reached for the gun tucked into his jacket, but he didn't draw it yet. He needed information, and he needed to know what these men wanted before he made his move. The first man reached the counter, his eyes locking with the biker's for a split second. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his cheek. The second man stood just behind him, shorter but no less menacing. Both of them had the look of men who had seen too much, men who were used to getting what they wanted. The air in the diner was thick with tension. The old waitress, who had been quietly wiping the counter, looked up nervously but said nothing. It was clear that she knew who they were. The biker kept his eyes on the men, his hands still resting on the table, fingers curled around the box. He needed to stay calm, to think his next move through. The man with the scar took a step toward him, his boots scraping against the floor. "You're the one," he said, his voice low but firm. The biker didn't flinch. "The one who found the box," the man continued, his eyes narrowing. The biker said nothing, watching him carefully. He didn't know how the man knew about the box, but it didn't matter. "I don't know what you're talking about," the biker replied, his voice steady. The man with the scar smirked. "You're lying. We've been watching you. We know exactly what you found, and now it's time to hand it over." The biker's heart skipped a beat. They knew about the box. But how? And why did they want it so badly? He glanced at the second man, who was still standing silently behind the first, watching with a cold intensity. The biker felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He could feel the heat of the moment, the tension building with every second. He wasn't going to give in easily. He had to find out more before making any moves. "And if I don't give it to you?" The biker asked, his voice steady despite the rising anxiety in his chest. The man with the scar chuckled darkly. Then we'll take it by force. You don't want that, trust me. The biker could feel the truth in his words. These men weren't bluffing. They were dangerous, and they weren't going to let him walk away. He needed a plan, and fast. The second man, who had been standing silently until now, stepped forward, his eyes locking on the box in the biker's hands. You don't know what you're dealing with, he said, his voice cold and precise. That box isn't just a box. It's part of something much bigger. Something you won't be able to escape from once you're involved. The biker frowned. He'd heard this before, but never with such intensity. What are you talking about? He asked, his mind racing. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the first man, who nodded slightly, as if signaling for him to continue. The box holds the key to a power that's been hidden for decades. And now that you've found it, you've become part of something much larger than you can comprehend, the second man explained. The biker felt a chill run down his spine. Power? Hidden for decades? This was bigger than he had thought. I don't want any part of this, the biker said, his voice low and resolute. Then you're already in it, the first man said with a shrug. You've crossed a line, and now you're going to help us finish what we started. The biker stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving the two men. He was trapped, but he wasn't going down without a fight. I don't know what you want, but I'm not handing over the box, he said, his voice steady. The man with the scar smiled, his expression dark. You don't have a choice. But we can make this easy on you. Just give us the box, and we'll let you walk away. The biker's hand hovered over his gun. He knew it was only a matter of time before things turned violent. He had to act fast, but he couldn't afford to make a mistake. He glanced toward the door, but before he could make a move, the door swung open again. This time, it wasn't just anyone walking in. It was her. The girl. The woman from the photos. She stood in the doorway, her eyes locked on the biker. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The two men turned to look at her, and the biker could see the recognition in their eyes. She was here, the woman who had been part of this all along. She stepped forward, her eyes not leaving the biker's face. You need to listen to them, she said quietly. You don't know what's at stake. The biker's heart raced. What did she mean? Why was she here? And why was she siding with them? He had so many questions, but no time to ask. The situation had escalated, and there was only one thing left to do: survive. The woman stepped into the diner, her presence commanding attention. She was no longer the frightened child the biker had seen in the photos, nor the innocent girl who handed him the box at the gas station. There was a coldness in her eyes now, a hardness that hadn't been there before. She stood in the doorway, her gaze fixed on the biker, as if weighing him in some unspoken way. The two men in front of the biker reacted immediately, their posture stiffening, their eyes narrowing. The biker's hand still hovered near his jacket, his fingers itching for the gun. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of everything. The woman had been part of this from the beginning. She wasn't a stranger, not some innocent bystander. She was in the middle of whatever game was being played. You're wasting your time, the woman said, her voice cold, cutting through the tension in the air. You can't keep running from this. You're already in it. The biker didn't respond immediately, his mind reeling. What did she mean? He thought he had been running toward the truth, but now it felt like he had stumbled into something much darker than he had anticipated. He had come to find answers, but now all he had were more questions. Why are you here? The biker finally asked, his voice low but steady. You know why? She replied, her eyes never leaving his. You've already found what you were looking for. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Her words hit him like a slap. He had found something, yes, but now the weight of it was sinking in. The box, the photos, the letter, it was all connected, and it was much bigger than he had thought. The biker's mind raced. If this woman knew so much, why hadn't she told him the whole truth? Why had she kept silent all this time? The man with the scar stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. Enough talk, he growled, his tone filled with impatience. We don't have time for your games. Hand over the box. The biker glanced at the second man, who hadn't moved since he entered. He was standing still, his cold eyes locked on the biker, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The biker knew he couldn't fight them both. Not without more information, not without knowing exactly what was at stake. He had to buy time, but how? What's in the box? The biker asked, looking at the woman. She hesitated, her lips pressing together as if she were weighing her options. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter this time. It's not about the box. It's about the legacy. The word echoed in the biker's mind. Legacy. It felt like a key to a door he had yet to open. But it didn't make sense. What did she mean by that? What legacy? He demanded. What's going on here? The woman took a step forward, her eyes now softening ever so slightly, like she was letting down her guard. The legacy of the Hells Angels isn't just about the bikes or the tattoos, she said slowly. It's about power, control, and it's been passed down, generation after generation, from one member to the next. The box you're holding contains the key to something much larger than you can imagine, something that the club has been protecting for decades. The biker's stomach twisted. He had always known that the club wasn't just a group of men on bikes. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Power? Control? What could that possibly mean? The woman continued, her voice steady, but there was an edge to it now, a sense of urgency. You have to understand, the box isn't just a trinket. It's part of something far more dangerous. If it falls into the wrong hands, everything changes. The man with the scar stepped forward again, his patience wearing thin. Enough with the stories, he said, his voice low and threatening. Hand over the box. Now. The biker could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The room was closing in, and there was no way out. But he couldn't hand over the box. Not yet. Not without knowing the whole truth. Tell me everything, he said, his voice steady but firm. The woman looked at him, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something, almost like regret, in her eyes. She sighed, then nodded. It's not just the Hells Angels who are after the box, she said softly. There are others. People who would kill to get their hands on what it contains. The club has been protecting it for years, and now you're part of this. Whether you like it or not. The biker's pulse quickened. He was in over his head, and he knew it. But there was no turning back now. He couldn't walk away from this. Not when the answers were within reach. He gripped the box tighter, his mind racing with everything he had just heard. It was bigger than the Hells Angels, bigger than him. And yet, he was caught in the middle of it all. The second man moved, his hand reaching for the biker. Give it to me, he growled. But the biker was ready. He stood up, the box in his hands, his eyes locked on the two men. Not yet, he said, his voice hard. Not until I know everything. The biker stood firm, the box still tightly gripped in his hands. The room felt smaller now, more suffocating. The two men before him were not just threats, they were the tip of the iceberg. He could sense it. The weight of everything he had uncovered so far was pressing down on him, and every instinct told him that walking away was no longer an option. His gaze flickered to the woman, who stood silently, her face unreadable. She hadn't moved since the two men arrived, but her presence was unsettling, as if she knew exactly how this would play out. The first man, the one with the scar, stepped forward, his voice low but laced with impatience. You're not getting it, he growled. We can end this right now. Hand over the box and walk away. You don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. The biker's pulse quickened, but his stance didn't waver. He knew he had no choice but to stand his ground. The man was right about one thing. This could be over quickly if he gave up the box. But something told him that doing so would cost him more than he was willing to pay. The second man, taller and colder in demeanor, took a step forward, his gaze cold and calculating. We've been patient with you, he said, his voice devoid of any empathy. But we're done waiting. The box isn't yours to keep. It's ours. The biker took a deep breath. His mind raced, but he didn't let it show. He had to buy more time, figure out what he was up against. And what exactly is in the box? He asked, keeping his voice steady. The scarred man smirked. That's not your concern. Just know it's not for you. Now, give it to us, and no one gets hurt. The biker shook his head. I'm not handing it over. Not without an explanation. The woman, who had been watching the interaction unfold, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but there was a clear sense of urgency behind her words. You don't understand, she said, stepping closer to the biker. This isn't just about the box. It's about everything that comes with it. The power it holds, the people who want it. If you keep it, if you're caught with it, you'll be in more danger than you can handle. The biker looked at her, trying to read her expression. Was she helping him, or was she part of the game? What do you know about it? He asked, his voice softening. More than you think, she replied, her eyes narrowing. I've been part of this for too long. The box is more than just a key to power. It's a symbol. It's what keeps certain people in control, people who would kill to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. The second man stepped forward again, his voice rising with frustration. Enough talking, he spat. We don't have time for your games. The biker could feel the tension building, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He needed a way out, and fast. He knew that he couldn't afford to give up the box, not without knowing what it really meant. I'm not giving it to you, he said, his voice firm. Not without knowing what's in it. The man with the scar pulled a gun from his waistband, the cold metal gleaming in the dim light of the diner. You're making a mistake, he said, the threat hanging heavy in the air. The biker's hand instinctively went to his own sidearm, but he didn't draw it. He knew he couldn't win in a straight-up fight. Not with both of them. Not yet, at least. Put the gun away, the biker said, his voice steady. You don't want to do this. The scarred man's finger twitched on the trigger, but before he could act, the woman stepped forward, her hand raised in a silent plea. Stop, she said, her voice calm, but commanding. You'll only make it worse. The biker shot her a confused look, but she didn't acknowledge him. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the two men, her expression hardening. You can't have it, she said, her voice quiet but filled with an unspoken finality. The two men looked at each other, then back at her, their expressions shifting. The tension in the room was palpable, thickening with every second. The scarred man took a step back, his gun still aimed at the biker, but his eyes now focused on the woman. Why are you helping him? He demanded. What's your stake in this? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took another step forward, as if trying to protect the biker. I have my reasons, she said, her voice cold. And you're not taking that box. Not from him. Not from anyone. The biker could feel the weight of her words, and though he didn't fully understand what was happening, he could sense that this was more than just a power struggle. It was personal. There was history here. And if he wanted to survive, he was going to have to follow her lead. The second man moved toward her, his expression hardening. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low. We'll take the box from you, one way or another. The biker could feel the room closing in on him. It was a standoff, and it wasn't going to end without a fight. But he wasn't ready to go down yet. Not without learning the truth. I'm not backing down, he said, his voice cold and firm. Not until I know what's in that box. The standoff in the diner was reaching a breaking point. The biker's hand rested lightly on his sidearm, his eyes flicking between the two men and the woman who had intervened. The scarred man still had his gun drawn, his finger twitching on the trigger, while the second man, cold and calculating, stood a few steps behind him, waiting for the moment to pounce. The woman's presence had shifted the balance in the room, but the tension was still thick enough to cut with a knife. The biker's mind raced as he weighed his options. He knew he couldn't walk away without answers, but he also knew that if he wasn't careful, things could turn deadly fast. You don't understand, the woman said, her voice steady but filled with quiet resolve. This isn't just about the box. This is about the future. About control. It's bigger than all of us. The scarred man's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer to her. I don't care about your games, he growled. We know what's in that box, and we're not leaving here without it. The biker could feel the heat of the moment closing in on him. The woman was right. This wasn't just about a box or power. This was about something much larger, something he was only starting to understand. But how far would he have to go to get to the truth? How far would they go to stop him from uncovering it? If you want it that badly, the biker said, his voice low and controlled, then come and take it. His words were like a spark, igniting the tension that had been building in the room. The scarred man's face twisted into a sneer as he stepped forward, gun still aimed at the biker. I warned you, he muttered, his finger inching closer to the trigger. But before he could pull it, the woman intervened again, stepping between the two men with a firm, unwavering stance. Enough, she said, her voice carrying a weight of authority that even the scarred man couldn't ignore. He hesitated, glancing at her with a mixture of confusion and anger. The biker took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the woman. She was the key to everything, but what side was she on? You need to understand, she said, her tone softening but still laced with urgency. There's more at play here than you can imagine. The people who want that box are not just looking for power, they're looking for something that could destroy everything. The biker's grip on the box tightened as her words sank in. He had known something big was at stake, but hearing her say it so directly made the weight of the situation feel more real than ever. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with a new sense of resolve. "Who's after the box?" The woman glanced at the two men, then back at the biker, her expression hardening. "You don't want to know?" she replied quietly. "But you're already in this. Whether you like it or not, you're a part of it now. And there's no turning back." The scarred man's patience had worn thin. He stepped forward, raising his gun once more. "I don't care about your threats," he snarled. "You're coming with us, and that box is coming with us." The biker knew the moment had arrived. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, the tension snapping in the air around him. Without warning, he drew his gun. The sound of metal scraping against leather filled the room as the biker's weapon came into view, aimed directly at the scarred man. For a brief moment, everything stopped. The scarred man froze, his hand still on the trigger of his gun, but his finger unmoving. The second man tensed, but he didn't make a move. The woman's eyes flickered between the two men and the biker, as if weighing the situation in the blink of an eye. The biker's pulse quickened. He didn't want to pull the trigger, but he was ready to defend himself. "I'm not going anywhere," the biker said, his voice low but unwavering. "And I'm not giving up the box." The scarred man's eyes narrowed, but before he could react, the woman stepped forward again, this time more forcefully. "Stop," she commanded, her voice sharp and commanding. "This isn't the way." The biker glanced at her, confused. Was she trying to stop the fight, or was she trying to control the situation in her own way? "You can't just shoot your way out of this," she said, her voice softening as she turned to face him. "You need to understand who's behind all this. The people after the box will stop at nothing to get it, and they won't hesitate to kill anyone who stands in their way." The biker looked at her, his thoughts racing. He knew she was right. This was bigger than any fight he had ever been in, and it was far from over. The scarred man lowered his gun, his eyes filled with frustration and anger. "You're making a mistake," he spat. "But fine. You keep the box for now. But don't think this is over. We'll be back. And next time, you won't have a choice." With that, the two men turned and walked toward the door. The tension in the room didn't dissipate immediately, but it was clear the moment had passed. The biker lowered his gun, his heart still pounding in his chest. He didn't know what had just happened, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to give up the box. Not without a fight. The woman turned to him, her expression still guarded. "You don't know what you've just gotten yourself into," she said quietly. "But you can't go back now. You're in this whether you like it or not." The biker nodded, his grip on the box tightening. "I'm ready," he said, his voice filled with resolve. The woman studied him for a moment before nodding. "Then let's go? We don't have much time." The biker followed her out the door, knowing that whatever came next, it was going to change everything. The biker followed her into the night, his thoughts still spinning, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The woman moved quickly ahead, her footsteps silent on the pavement, as though she had done this 1,000 times before. The biker's mind raced. The box, the cryptic letter, the dangerous men who had come for it. It was all leading him to a place he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He looked down at the box in his hands, its weight heavy with meaning, and his fingers tightened around it. The woman had told him it wasn't just a box. It was a key to something far bigger, something that had been buried for decades. She had been part of this for too long, and the secrets she was carrying seemed to be as dangerous as the box itself. The woman glanced over her shoulder, her face hard and unreadable. "Keep up," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "We don't have much time." He nodded, following her as she led him down a dark alleyway. The streets were empty, and the faint sound of their footsteps echoed off the brick buildings around them. There was a sense of urgency in the air now, a feeling that whatever was coming next was unavoidable. The biker's mind flashed back to the moment he had first held the box. The weight of it, the mystery it contained. It had always felt like it was pulling him deeper into something he couldn't control. The truth had always been just out of reach, but now, with the woman by his side, it seemed closer than ever. He had to know what was in it, what was so important that it could change everything. "Where are we going?" the biker asked, his voice steady but filled with a growing unease. The woman didn't answer immediately. She kept walking, her pace quickening. "You'll see," she said, her tone leaving no room for further questions. The biker felt the familiar pang of frustration, but he didn't press her any further. He knew that if he wanted answers, he would have to follow her lead. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached a small, nondescript building tucked away at the end of the alley. It looked like a warehouse, its metal door dark and weathered with age. The woman stopped in front of it and turned to face him. "This is it," she said quietly. "You're going to find the answers here." The biker glanced at the door, his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't just the building, it was what it represented. Everything was about to change, and he wasn't sure he was ready. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice low. The woman stepped closer to him, her eyes flicking over his shoulder as if checking for any unwanted attention. "It's where everything started, where the box has been kept hidden for years." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a key, similar to the one the biker had seen earlier. "This is the key to the truth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She handed him the key, and his fingers brushed against hers for a split second. He took it, feeling the cold metal against his skin. The box, the key, the letter, it was all leading to this moment. "You have to understand," she continued, her tone serious. "This isn't just about you or me. It's about what's been hidden for years. What the club has been protecting all this time. What they don't want anyone to know." The biker nodded, his hand trembling slightly as he took the key. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The woman's eyes softened, but only for a moment. She looked at him with a mix of regret and urgency. "I wish I could explain more. But the truth," she stopped, as if weighing her words. "The truth is dangerous. If you open that door, if you find out what's inside, there's no going back." The biker's heart thudded in his chest. He had come too far to turn back now. "I'm not turning back," he said, his voice firm. "I have to know." The woman met his gaze, her expression hardening once again. "Then let's go," she said, stepping forward and unlocking the door. The heavy metal door creaked open, and a rush of cold air hit the biker's face. He stepped inside, the darkness swallowing him whole. The woman followed him, her footsteps echoing in the silence. They walked deeper into the building, the air thick with the scent of dust and old wood. The place felt abandoned, but the biker knew better. He could sense the weight of history in the air, the lingering presence of something hidden, something powerful. They reached the back of the warehouse, where a large steel door stood, its surface scratched and worn. The woman stopped in front of it, turning to face him. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "Everything you need to know is behind that door." The biker's pulse quickened. He knew he was on the edge of something monumental. This was the moment. He could feel it in his bones. "What do I need to know?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. The woman looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for something in his eyes. Finally, she nodded. "The truth about the box. About the legacy. About everything." With a deep breath, she stepped forward and unlocked the steel door. The lock clicked, and the door slowly creaked open. The biker's heart raced as the secrets of the past came closer into view. He stepped forward, the darkness beckoning him, and the woman followed closely behind. The steel door groaned as it swung open, revealing a room that felt like it had been untouched for years. The air inside was cool, musty, and thick with the scent of old wood and dust. The biker stepped forward, his boots echoing softly on the concrete floor as he scanned the room. His heart raced, every step taking him closer to the answers he had been searching for, yet the unknown still loomed ahead. The woman followed closely behind, her footsteps almost silent, her presence a constant reminder of the danger that lingered. The room was vast, dimly lit by a few flickering bulbs overhead. It was filled with old crates, stacks of papers, and shelves lined with strange artifacts, items that looked like they belonged to another time. There was a large table in the center, covered with more documents, photographs, and a collection of odd, antique-looking objects. But what caught the biker's attention was the far wall. It was covered with a massive map, the edges frayed with age, and dozens of red pins stuck in various locations across the country. The map seemed to tell a story, a map of locations that were clearly important, but for what reason, he couldn't yet tell. The woman stepped up beside him, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for something specific. "This is where it all began," she said quietly. "The club's legacy. The secrets we've been protecting for so long." The biker's gaze shifted to her, his curiosity piqued. What is all this? What's the legacy? She turned to face him, her eyes dark and serious. The Hells Angels didn't just form as a motorcycle club, she said. We were founded on a cause, a secret, and that secret is buried in this room. She gestured to the room around them, the history contained in every inch of it. This map, she continued, her voice lower now, as though speaking of something sacred, marks the places that are important to the legacy, the places where the secrets are buried. And they've been hidden for decades, guarded by the club, by people like me. People who understand that some truths are too dangerous to reveal. The biker's mind raced. What kind of secret could be that dangerous? He asked, his voice tense. The kind that could tear everything apart, she replied, her expression hardening. The kind of secret that has to stay buried, or else everything we've worked for, the club, the power, the control, will be lost. The biker felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't sure if he wanted to know more, but he knew that he was already too deep in it to back out now. Why me? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Why did you bring me here? What's my role in all of this? She looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if weighing his sincerity. You're not just anyone, she said, her voice soft but firm. You're part of this. You've been chosen. The box, the map, the people after you, they're all connected to you now. You can't undo what's been set in motion. The biker clenched his jaw. He had always known that his past was tangled with the club, but he hadn't expected it to lead him here, to this moment, standing in a room filled with secrets that seemed bigger than he could handle. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. You need to understand the weight of what you're holding, she said, glancing at the box in his hands. The box contains the final piece of the puzzle, the key to the future of the club, and if the wrong people get their hands on it, they'll use it to take everything from us. She stepped closer to the table, pointing to a stack of photographs. The biker walked over, examining the images laid out before him. There were pictures of past club members, their faces serious, their eyes filled with determination. Some of the men were familiar to him, old friends from his time in the club, but there were others whose names he didn't recognize. These are the men who carried the secret before you, she said, her voice quiet. They were the guardians of the legacy, just like you are now. But they weren't all trustworthy. Some of them betrayed the club. Some of them tried to use the secret for their own gain. The biker looked at the woman, his mind spinning. What happened to them? He asked. They're gone, she said simply. Some died in the line of duty. Others were eliminated because they couldn't be trusted. The secret has a way of turning people, of breaking them. But you have to be stronger. You have to protect the secret, no matter the cost. The biker swallowed hard. This was more than he had bargained for. The weight of the box in his hands suddenly felt much heavier. How do I protect it? He asked, his voice strained. The woman turned toward him, her gaze unwavering. You'll find out soon enough, she said, her voice low and filled with warning. But for now, you need to be ready. The people who want that box are already on their way, and they won't stop until they have it. They'll do whatever it takes to get it. The biker took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had never wanted to be part of something this big, this dangerous. But there was no turning back now. He had already crossed the line. What do we do next? He asked, his voice calm, but filled with determination. The woman's eyes flickered with a mix of resolve and fear. We prepare, she said. And we fight. The biker stood in the dimly lit room, the weight of the box still heavy in his hands. The woman's words hung in the air, thick with the promise of danger and the unknown. They had no time to waste. She had said they needed to prepare, but the biker wasn't entirely sure what that meant. He was used to fighting, used to the harsh reality of the streets, but this felt like something far beyond anything he'd encountered. The room around him seemed to close in, the walls heavy with the secrets it held. He had thought that once he had the box, once he understood what it contained, everything would make sense. But the more he uncovered, the more questions there seemed to be. The woman turned toward the far wall, where a large map was pinned up, showing the same locations that had been marked before, dots connected by a web of red threads. The biker followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing as he studied the map. There was a lot at stake here, and the more he learned, the less clear it all became. What is all this? He asked, his voice rough. She looked at him, her eyes cold but filled with something he couldn't quite place. The map shows the key locations, places tied to the legacy. The power that we've been guarding for so long. She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of one of the pins. The club is more than just a group of men. It's an organization built on something deeper. We protect more than just bikes and territory. We protect a legacy, a secret that could change everything. The biker felt a shiver run through him. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he knew that whatever it was dangerous. "And you think I'm part of this?" he asked, his voice tense. "You're more than part of it," she replied, her voice low. "You've been chosen. The box, the map, the key, it's all connected to you now. It's up to you to finish what was started." The biker stepped back, trying to process what she was saying. He had never asked for this. He had never wanted to be part of any secret, much less one so powerful. But now it seemed like there was no escaping it. "What do you mean, finish what was started?" he asked, his mind spinning. She looked at him for a long moment, as if considering how much to say. The people after the box, they're not just after power. They're after control. Control over everything. The legacy is a key to that control. And you have it. He shook his head, still not understanding. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just found the box. I'm not part of some legacy." The woman's eyes hardened. "You don't have to ask for it. It's yours now. And whether you like it or not, you're part of this. You've been dragged into something bigger than you could ever imagine." The biker turned away, frustration boiling in his chest. He didn't want this. He didn't want any of it. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized there was no walking away. The box, the people after it, everything was connected. And there was no escaping it. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice tight. "We prepare," she said, turning to face him. "We fight. And we protect the box." "How do we do that?" The woman's eyes were hard, but there was a flicker of something else, something that almost looked like regret. "We don't have a choice. The club has always protected the secret, but now it's up to you. The people after the box, they're ruthless, and they won't stop until they get it." The biker felt his heart race. He had known this was coming, but hearing it from her made it all the more real. "So what do you want me to do?" he asked, trying to steady himself. She took a deep breath. "We need to stay ahead of them. The club has resources, but we can't do it alone. We have to move fast, gather what we need, and be ready for whatever comes next." The biker nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that he couldn't run from this. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. "Where do we start?" he asked, his voice steady. "We start by getting to the people who know the truth," she said, her tone sharp. "We find the ones who have the answers, and we make sure no one else gets to them first." She reached for a nearby shelf, pulling down a folder filled with papers. "These are the names, the locations. It's all here. But we need to move quickly. The clock's ticking." The biker took the folder, his hands steady as he flipped through the pages. The names, the locations, it was all starting to make sense. But the more he read, the more questions he had. There was so much to uncover, so much that he didn't know. But one thing was clear, he was in this now. He didn't have a choice. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice low with determination. The woman gave him a nod, her expression unreadable. Together, they walked toward the door, ready to face whatever came next. The game had changed, and there was no going back. The biker knew this was only the beginning. Whatever the legacy was, whatever the box held, it was about to change everything. And he had to be ready for whatever came next. The biker stood at the edge of the alley, looking down at the city before him. The weight of everything that had happened, the box, the legacy, the secrets, pressed heavily on him. It was a long road from here, one he hadn't expected to walk, but there was no turning back. The woman, who had become both his guide and his mystery, stood beside him, her gaze fixed ahead. The tension between them had only grown since the night they first crossed paths, but there was no room for hesitation now. Whatever this was, whatever they were about to face, they had to do it together. "You know this isn't over," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of resolve and weariness. The biker nodded, his hands resting on the box that had started it all. He hadn't looked inside, not yet. Maybe it wasn't time. Maybe he wasn't ready for the truth. But the map they had found, the names, the connections, it was all leading him here, to this moment. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not backing down. Not now." The woman glanced at him, a flicker of something passing in her eyes. She had seen his strength, his resolve. She had seen his past, too, the broken roads that had brought him here. But she also knew the stakes. "You're not just fighting for the box," she said. "You're fighting for everything it represents. The power, the control, the future of the club. It's all tied together now." The biker's eyes narrowed, his thoughts heavy with what she said. Power and control. It wasn't just about the box. It never had been. He had thought he could simply walk away, find some peace, but peace wasn't what he had been given. The club had a legacy, one rooted in more than just brotherhood. It was a power that stretched back for generations, and now it was in his hands. Or was it? "What if I don't want any part of it?" he asked, his voice softer now. The woman didn't hesitate. "You already have a part in it. You've been chosen, whether you like it or not. That's what the box is about. It's not a choice. It's a path." The biker turned away, his jaw clenched. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he knew she was right. He had been dragged into something much bigger than he had ever imagined, and no matter how hard he fought, there was no going back. He could feel it in his bones, the weight of what was to come. He couldn't ignore the pull of it. It was too strong, too consuming. The road ahead wasn't clear, and it never would be. The moment the box had found its way into his hands, his fate had been sealed. "So what now?" he asked, looking at her once more. She met his gaze, her expression hard, determined. "Now we finish what we started," she said. "Now we take control." The biker nodded, the resolve settling into his chest like iron. "Then let's do it." They turned and walked down the alley together, the sounds of the city growing louder around them. The world felt heavy, its weight pressing on his shoulders, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, he was ready. The woman led the way, her footsteps steady, while he followed, his thoughts filled with the path that lay ahead. There were people who wanted the box. They wanted the power it held, and they were coming for it, for him. He didn't know how far they would go to get it, or what it would cost to keep it, but he had no choice. He was already too deep into this, too tied to the legacy. The fight was coming, and he would face it head on. As they reached the end of the alley, the biker took a deep breath. The city was alive with possibilities, each one darker than the last. But he was no longer a man on the run. He had a purpose now, something bigger than himself, something worth fighting for. He was ready to face the storm, to take control. This was just the beginning. He didn't know what the future held, but he was no longer afraid to find out.